we heard exclusively from Chelsea co-owner Todd Bowley at the top of the show. Chelsea, club world champions. Chelsea fans have been reacting to the chat I did yesterday with Todd Bowley. Chelsea, Stefan, estimated to have earned 85 million quid by winning the competition. Runners-up PSG banked about £70.4 million. Stefan, in a broad sense, what does the Club World Cup and the winnings do for their finances?
Well, the finances, it depends what you're talking finances wise. I mean, you can basically split it in half and say they'll do 40 million in the season that's just gone, because the first half of the tournament was in June, and they'll do 40 million in the forthcoming year. They've still got very big holes in the profit and loss, and we know also that they will have significant bonuses that they'll need to pay off to the players.
And they've got UEFA fines coming down the pike as well, haven't they?
And they've been hit with that fine. So they're in. But the reality is, from a PSR perspective, they're in perfectly good shape now. Of course, because if you sell £275 million of assets to yourself, then that solves the PSR issue. And we know they're also in fantastic shape from a UEFA perspective in respect of the stability football earnings test we spoke about the other day. They've done a very, very good deal where they're paying 20 million euros up front and effectively bought themselves the next 5 years of an easy ride on the football earnings test. So the only thing that's left from a UEFA perspective is the squad cost control and the limit of the 70% that they've got to hit.
Yeah.
And the implications that they've got in relation to their what's known as the List A of the players that they want to register for next season's Champions League. So they've got a bit of a wrinkle there. But, you know, they're trading and people are buying players, and Madueke deal is going to be very important for that. And they have other players who it looks like they're probably going to be able to trade at a profit. And so they'll be fine, I think, on registering players. And so the only thing they've got to worry about is, can they get their costs under control? Their wage bill, contrary to, and I think one of your callers earlier was talking about how smart they've been with the wage bill. Unfortunately, their actual numbers suggest that their wage bill is still extremely large, and likely, given the incentivization that apparently they put into all of these contracts, is likely to be large again for both 24-25, because they actually won things, and also 25-26. So I wouldn't imagine that the wage bill is going to see a big dip. And then on top of that, of course, they've got to sort out their commercial side. And at the moment, we know they still don't have a front of shirt sponsor.
So in a sentence, what's Chelsea's current state of health financially?
I think they're completely fine, because from all of the regulatory stuff, they're basically going to be okay except for a few fines.
Right.
And all of the cash side of things, your man Todd Bowley, who was on the phone, he and his investors will continue to fund the cash.
Where are they with the challenges that they gave themselves by volunteering the information that they had to volunteer to some extent on the disclosure of some of the activities of Abramovich and his team?
Well, this is a very good question. I mean, Jim spoke to Richard Masters now almost a year ago, and he said to you, we are almost at the conclusion of that investigation. And then in January, the Times reported that they were in negotiations for a settlement agreement in respect of that matter, which would still have to go to an independent commission to approve it. And that was said in that article in January they were hoping to complete it by the end of March. Well, we're now almost in mid-July. Well, we are in mid-July, and it's still not happened. Now, I would think probably the sanction agreement cannot be agreed. If it has not been agreed in 6 months, that sounds to me like either the story was wrong, or there is a problem trying to agree a sanction agreement, and therefore it will go to a full hearing and charge.
Yeah. On many occasions, we have Tottenham fans joining us saying, we've got a problem with Daniel Levy at the top of the house because, yes, we have a state-of-the-art stadium, but we want a team in the pitch that wins. And they did win something. They won themselves a trophy. But Daniel still comes in for it. Committing £115 million, though, Stefan, and 2 players, Kudus and Gibbs-White. Where do we think the Spurs money's coming from?
Well, they've just saved themselves 60 million quid because Nottingham Forest aren't selling, are they? And by the way, this morning, if it is correct, the report that there's been a formal complaint to the Premier League regarding that transaction, that I think might actually be quite significant, because once a formal complaint is made to the Premier League it's either in the form of an arbitration request, i.e. that the two clubs will, that Nottingham Forest will effectively sue in the Premier League rules, will take action against Nottingham Forest, or alternatively they are inviting the Premier League board to investigate Spurs.
Yeah.
And if Spurs are investigated, it will be alleged that they were trying to induce a breach of contract and a breach of confidentiality, and that appears to be relatively serious. Now the only question is, what's the loss? Well, that's difficult to calculate. Were there other bidders? Have they actually lost anything at all? But it may have developed into a more serious issue. So they may not be spending that 60 million on Gibbs-White this summer.
As it stands, then, for all the football fan wants to know, the Tottenham fan, are we going to get this guy?
Well, I don't know whether they're going to get him. I think they'll have to pay more than the release fee to effectively settle off the claim from Marinakis. I think, the reality is that Nottingham Forest are basically saying, look, if you want him, you're not having him for the release fee, so we're back in a negotiation. And if it's a release fee deal, then they're saying, well, you've induced him to breach. So we're entitled to the difference between what he's worth and what you've induced him to be sold at.
You told me yesterday, Simon, I didn't realise this. I thought it was a simple case, as with Jack Grealish going from Villa to City, that when the magic number is triggered and the bid comes in that case 100 million, in this case 60, that was it.
Well, I mean, it's a good point, because if you think about how Tottenham might have approached it, let's say Tottenham were aware of it, they could have kept that to themselves and shoved in a bid of the number that did trigger automatically the release. Now, it seems that they didn't do that because the outside world knew that this was a release clause. So I don't know what the process was around that, but it seems to me that if they had just pursued a bid in the ordinary course, in the ordinary way in which they would make that bid.
The three parties that would know this about this release clause would be the player, the agent, and the club.
Yeah. So
if Forest haven't told anybody, then it will come from the agent. So I'm trying to work out where Tottenham have created an inducement. If an agent rocks up to Tottenham Hotspur and says, I represent Morgan Gibbs-White, and I can get him out of Morgan Gibbs-White for the release clause of 60 million quid, are you interested? What's that got to do with inducement?
Because they know. Spurs know, unless
Forest's case would be against the agent.
Well, yeah, sure, but unless Spurs can show that they really had no idea before the agent turned up and said, oh, by the way, there's a release clause, and they were just sort of caught in the lights, and they were like, oh, well, I don't know why you told us that, we didn't want to know that. Mm-hmm. Unless that was the case, then Spurs are in the mix here.
Yeah, so Marinakis has got to prove that Spurs approached the agent first and suggested to the agent.
There was some kind of collusion or conspiracy around discovering the terms of the contract and the potential of there being a release clause. Now, if there may well be an email.
It's not an easy proof.
Sure, but there may well be a WhatsApp.
If he's got a smoking bullet,
is there a WhatsApp from Spurs saying, what do we need to bid here?
Yeah,
to get the player. Right, which is not unlikely that there is something like that. Then maybe Nottingham Forest.
Inducement?
Well, it's close, isn't it?
How's it inducement?
Well,
you're able to
because they might suspect, or on the look. Let's be honest. They know.
I think
they knew about the release clause.
Yes, I think.
Right?
But everybody knows everybody's business.
I know that.
I think Marinakis is tub thumping, as he does in lots of different instances. It might end up in the same situation as Virgil van Dijk. That somehow along the line that there's a consequence for Spurs' perceived overindulgence in being overzealous in the information.
Yeah, but that's probably quite significant in that case, because I think with Liverpool and Van Dijk, it was easier for Liverpool to say, look, we'll just come back for you in January.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
But it's still charged with, didn't they?
So there's a bit to go yet.
Yes, and they paid up. But also Gibbs-White is not...
But do I think the answer to the question is, would I sit here and put my money down on Gibbs-White going to Spurs? Yes.
You would. Okay. Stefan, he said it. Stefan Borson, as always, thank you so much for coming by. It's 11:30.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.